Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Hello, everyone. Today's Fun Chat is another look into Jackie's and my life. And actually, we're going to talk about a culture group, as culture groups were so important to the influence of that generation of the 1950s, such as Jackie and me. You know, prior to our birth and our parents' birth was our grandparents and great grandparents, and that was all occurring in the mid to late 1800s. But the influence they had on those next generations was great. And I think we particularly noted that, Jackie, because we grew up in North Dakota, where that Germans and Germans from Russia, those culture groups were so prevalent throughout our state. Would you agree to that?
Yes, ma'am. Shall I begin when telling about our Germans from Russia history?
Yes.
All right. So our ancestral story begins in America when our great-grandfather, Jacob Brost, who was born November 5th of 1858 in Denowitz, Ackerman District, Bessarabia, which is now the area of the Ukraine right now. He immigrated with his mother, Elizabeth. Her maiden name was Weber, and they landed here in America on April 13th, 1877. Now, 3 years after his father, Johann, had died in 1875, his brave mother, Jacob's brave mother, took her youngest 5 children to America with her. Now, Jacob was about 19 and a half, and 3 brothers and 1 sister came to America with them. The older siblings who stayed in Bessarabia would have been 30, 28, 26, and 22. This woman was tough.
Yes.
She left 4 there and came with 5, and what a gal. So,
well, can you tell us a little bit about why the Germans went to Russia? Why did they? Why is that important to us?
This was at least 100 years ago, when the Catherine the Great said, "Hey, folks, we've got this farmland in the Volga River Valley, and it's on the Black Sea, and it's free. And you in Germany are running out of land, so come join us in that area." So many Germans from Russia, Germans came to Russia at that time, and at that time, Catherine said, "You can have your own religion. You won't have to serve in our army. You can be free to plant whatever you wanted, and just work that land." Well, about 100 years later, and I maybe not quite exactly on that, a relative of hers said, "Well, I think maybe you need to serve in our army now. And no, you can't have your own religion. And no, you can't do this. And no, you can't do that." So they said, "Well, see ya. We're going to America."
Yes.
And that's a Cliff Note version.
Okay. Well, I like Cliff Note versions. It makes it easier to understand. So then our great grandmother then took her 4 youngest children. Is that correct? Okay. And then they trekked back from Russia to Germany. I wonder if they stopped and saw relatives and all that, and what that would have been an interesting story to know, is how did her parents feel about her taking her youngest children and getting on that ship, and making that 2-week trip to the United States.
That ship.
Okay, let me bring
it's
you
called the Mosel.
If I can. It seems like I can't get you. There we go. Maximize. There.
There we go. So there is the ship.
Okay.
It doesn't look like a very comfortable voyage. Anyway, it's the SS Mosel, And it says here that on April 13th of 1878, they landed in New York City and at this particular station. This is called the Castle Garden Immigrant Center, Immigrant Depot, and Ellis Island had not yet been established. So they came to this spot right there.
Okay. And her name was Catherine Mocht at the time, Mogck. Is that correct? Okay. Mm-hmm. So here she was with these little.
Actually, I've heard this was Elizabeth Weber was the mother.
Oh yeah. Okay. Because Jacob married Catherine. Okay. Her older son, 19-year-old son, who I suppose was almost considered a man at that time, and she probably felt very safe with him helping lead her family to America. Then they landed at Castle Garden in New York, correct?
Correct.
And
New York City it was.
And then made their way to where in the United States?
To Yankton, South Dakota, which happened to be the territorial capital.
Okay.
And he was there for his growing up years or his beyond his years. He married then Catherine, like you say, Mock. Fast forward 4 years, he was there for 4 years, and then he found this gal, and they married, and these were some of their children. The union produced one son, which you see, and 4 daughters, and there were only 2 daughters there. And our grandma is the baby sitting on her mom's lap.
Okay.
That's our Grandma Justina, who's our parental grandma. So in the we have a question to ask?
Well, yes, I just think a lot of times to me, when I hear numbers, those years of the 1800s, the 1850, 1860, 1878, they don't necessarily mean anything to me. But because of this story, what we have discovered through our 4th cousin, Alan Brose, who lives in Washington, D.C., that part of our heritage, the Germans from Russia part, has become alive for me, and I'm much more curious about it. And perhaps there are listeners to our 1950s Fun Chat who can identify with the Germans from Russia culture. Now, I'm sorry, I interrupted you. And
well,
where do they go? Where do they go from there?
What you've said was this. Okay, they went to Culm, North Dakota. In 1899, Jacob moved his family to Culm, and then he entered the hardware business in partnership with George Gackle Sr. And there is now still today a town of Gackle, North Dakota, named after George Gackle. And he stayed there until 1905. And the following year, he moved to Goodrich, where Jacob conducted a general mercantile business.
And so where's Goodrich from Gackle?
Where is it? North and west.
A little bit west and quite a ways north, one would think.
Yeah, right. So he probably found out that they needed a mercantile, and so he thought, being an industrious guy, he thought, well, I'm going to go there. And this was his daughter, our Grandma Justina, at the time of, she was age 20 at this time. So then she was working in the mercantile, and in walked this handsome Charles Pfeiffer. And so they were assuming, maybe, I'm supposing they met in about, what do we say, 1920? No, not 1920.
Our grandpa and grandma were married in 1909.
Right. So maybe they met in 1908 or something. Anyway, got married 31st on New Year's Eve in 1909. And then...
Well, okay, tell us about how our grandpa Charles Pfeiffer even came to be in North Dakota.
When Grandpa Pfeiffer was younger, his father died. He was like 2, and so his mother married a man by the name of Wettstein.
And they were living where?
And they were living in Iowa, Marshalltown, Iowa.
Okay.
And so he was a land speculator. His stepfather was a land speculator, which was kind of common in that day for people to be land speculators because there was a lot of free land in the Midwest. So he came up to Goodrich, and I have no idea why he chose that. But anyway, when he was there, then Grandpa met Grandma at the mercantile, and bingo, sparks flew.
So someone who, with as our Grandpa Pfeiffer, with a strict German background, met Grandma Justine, or Justina. We always called her Justine, or who was part Germans from Russia, part Germans, and actually. German is German, and yet they moved to Russia. So I think that's why they latched on to that being the importance of having been and having that culture group in Germans from Russia. Yeah. So that's how that connection, that pedigree, what you might say, was established, and for us, and began for us.
It did. And she was 21 when she married Charles.
Okay, let me get you.
And then they moved to a farm near Goodrich. So here they are.
Okay. And they were, as was so true with that culture group, the Germans from Russia, and I'm sure other culture groups too. We just are unaware of that. They were industrious. They worked. I always, when I hear someone say, "Oh, we work so hard," I think the term "hard" can mean something to one person and something else to another. But I think in many people's cases, especially when you're in agriculture, you work hard because you toil. You physically toil. Your bodies were used to work, and not only your physical bodies, but your minds, in order to make a living and provide for your family. Well, I believe too that the North Dakota happened to be on the same, is it parallel when it goes east and west, as was Odessa in Russia, wasn't it? And so I think that's why so many of the Germans from Russia came to South Dakota and then North Dakota. They were used to being wheat farmers in the Ukraine, and they were wheat farmers on the prairie. That they knew how to grow that crop and how it flourished in North Dakota. So that evidently was part of the welcoming party for coming. Once they got into the United States, there was comfort there. Not only was there comfort in their relatives could have been already here in the United States, and in our case, they were, because they in the Yankton, South Dakota area, southeast South Dakota. But then they were also familiar with how to grow a crop that would thrive and be an income producer for this wonderful culture group of the Germans from Russia. Now, when we were recently in Wishick, North Dakota for our book signing and for the 100th anniversary of Sauerkraut Days, we met a lot of wonderful people who are from that Germans from Russia group. That's in the Linton, North Dakota, Linton, Strasburg, Napoleon, Wishick, that's Ashley area, and then even going into South Dakota, crossing the border at Eureka, that was a stronghold for the Germans from Russia group. And when I say Strasburg, perhaps that town brings up aha, because that's where Lawrence Welk was from. So Strasburg, North Dakota, so that Germans from Russia group. Well, okay, so we've got Grandma Pfeiffer, Grandma Justina, living in Goodrich with her sisters and brother, more than likely, and her father and mother, and they're running this mercantile. She's met Charlie Pfeiffer, and so they marry. Tell us, Jackie, because then after Grandpa and Grandma Pfeiffer retired from farming, they moved to Bismarck, and that's where our connection picks up so well to them, and the influence, especially that Grandma Pfeiffer and her Germans from Russia culture and heritage was so influential in our lives. Can you give some instances of that? I know you often said that you felt so close to Grandma Pfeiffer.
Well, I think that I've felt close to her because Grandma Pfeiffer has beautiful blue eyes, and they kind of sparkled. And I can just see that there's a little bit of mischief in her eyes, and I could relate to mischief. And then when I would maybe be have too much mischief, she would say, "Oh, you daresn't do that."
You
And
doesn't?
you daresn't, dare not. You
Oh,
daresn't do that. You daresn't do that. And that's all. I mean, I was probably I probably knew I was kind of being a twit or whatever, a little bother, but it was like I like to push the envelope, and so she would say, "You daresn't do that."
do you remember any instances why she might say that
No,
to you?
I'm sure I know there was more than one though.
Okay. Well, the thing that some of the things that I remember about Grandma Pfeiffer was her jolly attitude,
Hmm.
her jolly personality, and that probably was part of many people who came from Germany, Germans
Hmm.
from Russia. But also, I might reflect back too on the name of Brost.
Hmm.
Her maiden name was Brost. And yet we always said Brost, but yet after having met our fourth cousin Alan from Washington, D.C., he pronounces his name as Bros, and it's spelled differently too, with a Z on the end, whereas ours is an ST. And then he's even talked about the name Brost. And he says it like that because that's how he remembers the old timers saying their name. But think of how many people when they came to this country, and it's not just with the German culture, it's with other cultures too. They changed either the pronunciation and or the spelling of their name, and perhaps that was to be accepted more in this country. Who knows? But it is really interesting with the fact that we can be related to a
Hmm.
Brost, and we can be related to a Bros, and I think you also have spelling is as B a Brost, B-R-O-S.
Bross.
Yes. So that's another interesting fact about cultural groups, and especially for us, it's the Germans from Russia culture.
It
Okay,
is.
let's get back to Grandma Justina.
Okay.
Her industriousness, and I think that was definitely part of the culture in which she grew up. And when you think about it, her parents, maybe in some grandparents' cases, and that they had to make the decision first off to come to this strange new land and to ride that ship for 2 weeks and then to try to come here, perhaps not knowing any English at all, and get to what would have been a safe spot, perhaps
Hmm.
in meeting up for instance, in our culture and Yankton, where there were other families who had preceded our great great grandma and her family from coming here on the ship. So it's the industriousness, it's the desire, it's the need for religious freedom, it's the need for freedom to live and
And
provide
worship.
for your family.
And worship.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes, and freedom to worship. And do you remember anything at all about our grandma Justine talking about that?
No, I don't. I just know that they were Lutheran in Germany, and they brought that with them,
Hmm.
and that continues through my family. Just that is a source of comfort to for me. Also, my grandpa, our mom's mom, grandmother, was from Germany. Also, a different part of Germany though than the our paternal
Our,
side. But I do remember at that time, Mom saying, when we were little, we would go to Grandma Louise's in the afternoon. She'd sit all her grandchildren around her dining room table, and she'd give us like confirmation. She would school us in German
mhm.
what it meant to be Lutheran. So that was kind of another a neat feeling that's carried on for generations.
Okay. Well, I can also think about the food habits and the dishes from that were prepared for their in different culture groups. No matter what it is, they each had their own specialties. But our Germans from Russia culture, with Grandma, she was a phenomenal cook, as I think probably most of those women were of that culture, and they made a lot of food for the table that had to that were starchy. And I think that those starch foods, such as potatoes, such as strudel, such as nefla, and we used to call it knipfla, but we hear it in North Dakota now as nefla. If you had flour, water, eggs, you could,
You make anything.
and a great garden, you could make up a wonderful meal for your family, or for threshers, or for whoever you were bringing in. And of course, the desserts. There, I often heard of strudel as being made as a dessert in Germany, but our Grandma Pfeiffer would make strudel with and serve it with roast beef and potatoes and gravy. And in our book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s, on page 221, we talk a little bit about Grandma, because that on Fridays, when, especially if we were on vacation from school, we would help Mom and Dad on our egg day, which Dad had an egg route in Bismarck, but we always would eat our noon meal at Grandpa and Grandma Pfeiffer's. And on this page 221, this paragraph, I think, is so special to me, and I think for both of us, because we'd watch Grandma make this. And I have on egg day, we always took our noon meal at Grandpa and Grandma Pfeiffer's house on North 11th Street. Our Germans from Russia heritage was apparent in Grandma's expertise in gently stretching strudel dough until it was as thin as underpants. And I don't know why we ever said that, but we did, an expression we girls had coined. Grandma's practiced hands had the knack of stretching the dough so thinly that it was translucent, much like the thin material of our dainties. Then she'd cut the dough into strips, roll it up, cook it in boiling water, and serve it with melt in your mouth roast beef, boiled potatoes, and gravy. I'd love to eat that again today. But that picture is still vivid in my mind. She would, in this small kitchen in their home in Bismarck, she would stand at this little table in their kitchen, and she'd roll out this dough, and then she'd pick it up. I think she'd brush butter on it, and then she'd pick it up, get her hands underneath this large piece of dough, and she just starts stretching it so gently and thinly, and it was so thin, and that's what made it so delicious. And then of course she made nepla, and she also made, what else you can recall? Oh, cabbage was a big deal too when we'd go there.
Pigs in the blanket.
Yes, pigs in the blanket. And that's cabbage, ground beef, rice, tomato soup, etc. And sometimes Mom would make that at home too. But I think a lot of times these foods that were from the Germans from Russia culture, particularly with Grandma Justina's case, was because Dad loved those foods. And so Mom would make them for him and for us. And we developed a love for them.
Yep. Comfort foods. But she always fed us as if we had a whole morning of work behind us and another afternoon of work ahead of us. We never went away hungry.
That's correct. Correct. You know, another way that I remember Grandma, I talk about her industriousness, but she had such a desire to be around people and to make them feel welcome, whether it be inviting them into her home or working outside of the home. And of course, Grandpa and Grandma were retired, but that word didn't stop Grandma from working. And so they lived on North 11th Street. They lived just a half a block from where the Bismarck City bus would stop. So Grandma never drove. She didn't ever have a driver's license. So she would go over and catch the bus, and I suppose the fare was maybe a dime, and that bus would take her downtown to the Sears and Roebuck store where she worked. She loved that job. And I do remember one time, I believe she was on her department was on the second floor. Was it the lingerie, Jackie? Do you remember what? It was women's
something like that.
Yes.
It was lingerie.
Yes. Well, anyway, she worked on commission at that point, as many of the people, at least in her department, had worked. And so whenever she was allowed to take a coffee break, she never would take it. She would always encourage her fellow sales women to take theirs because she wanted them gone so that she could help the customers and gain those and encourage those sales and gain those commissions from those sales. So she was kind of sneaky about that, but that was a way for her to bring home more money for them. And then, of course, she did babysitting. She loved to babysit at night times, and she had two special families in Bismarck for whom she babysat. One was the Dr. Clary family, and the other one was, I believe it was Fred Sefke family. And you know, when she would talk about those children who she babysat, it was as if they were her own grandchildren. She loved to talk. She always was telling us stories about those children. And it's almost as if they became part of our family, even though we had never met them. Right. And I think too that those families loved her so much that they were grandma to those children at that point in time. So grandma could spread her love that way. Yeah. Well, she also liked to volunteer. And do you remember, Jackie, where she volunteered?
Why, she was a gray lady at the Bismarck Hospital.
And who are gray ladies?
Well, the gray ladies are those volunteer people who do whatever needs to be done as far as making people welcome. They worked in the gift shop. They maybe wrote letters for people who needed who were a patient, but they were just there to, I guess they were kind of grandma kind of people too, to give emotional support to wherever it was needed.
Yes. There were some Sundays that if we happened to be at Grandpa and Grandma's in the afternoon, and Grandma it was her time to have her shift at the coffee shop at the then Bismarck Hospital, that when Grandpa would go to pick her up after her shift was over, Jackie and I would go into the coffee shop and we'd sit on those rotating stools and just watch her as she was still talking with people sitting at that coffee bar, and as she was cleaning up. And so it was fun. It was always fun for me to observe what my grandparents and my parents, as particularly as they work with others and serve them. And I think maybe that's where I acquired my love of creating with food and serving others and making that happen. So I'm very appreciative of that. But you know, Grandma was not without illness. And can you recall that time when she had that illness?
Oh, she had breast cancer and had a breast removed, and you know, she was like, "Oh, it's nothing. It's not a big deal." In fact, I don't think we children learned that until after it was over. But one time we were sitting there, she was kind of anyway, we're just sitting there, we're talking about it, and she reached her hand into her dress and pulled out this wad of socks. So that was her left breast.
She didn't need an implant.
No, I was just shocked. Grandma.
And what did she say to you?
Well, I don't remember, but it was the shock of having that wad of Grandpa's socks there.
Yes. And this would have been in the last part of the 50s, wasn't it?
Or 50, maybe, yes, it would have been, yeah.
58, 59-ish. Well, they had their 50th wedding anniversary on December 31st of 1959. And I do not remember if her
might have been after that then.
Okay, a few years later. Yeah. Yes.
Back to the Gray Ladies. Gray Ladies is an extension of the American Red Cross.
Oh, okay. So okay. And you know, Grandma approached that with a cheerful heart, as she did most everything. And perhaps that was the nature of many Germans from Russia. It'd be lovely to know if some of our viewers would write comments and tell us what if they have that ancestry in their pedigree, and tell us with that. But one thing too that I remember about that 50th wedding anniversary, of course, the reception at that time, a lot of people had 50th wedding anniversary receptions in the church hall, you might say. And so that was in the afternoon, and Grandma had this beautiful new dress, and Grandpa, I don't think he got a new suit. He might have gotten a new white shirt or tie or something like that. But they had this lovely picture taken. And you and I both have had our 50th wedding anniversaries, and we're still moving forward with that. And I look at Grandpa and Grandma's picture and I think, they look like Grandpa and Grandma's with 50th years behind them. I don't think we look like that. Do you?
No, I don't. But they had a hard life, maybe a harder life than we have had.
Yes.
Out in the elements. I don't know. So that's right. And our, yeah.
Well, imagine living through just the Depression and trying to care for your family and survive that, or World War II and beyond. We happen to be the product of the generations after that time, and yet that's what's I think it was so cool, Jackie, for you and me, is that we can look back and learn from our heritage of Germans from Russia, and perhaps pick out some understanding of maybe why we are the way we are, or they think the way we are, or they have the personalities that we are. But it is certainly interesting to reflect back on a culture group that was part of our family and influential then in the 1950s, and it really still is now.
And if there's one thing that I think back on from our parents and then from their parents too, is that my mom used to say, work never killed anybody. It's not so much that it's the work, but it's the tenacity with what you're doing. And you've got a goal, you work at it.
Yes.
You don't expect people to give you anything. You must do things yourself.
That's right.
And there's pride in that.
Yes.
You did it.
And that helps. I think it helps make the work. What's that saying? Making light work. Oh, many hands make light work. Right. That's what Mom often would say. Many hands make light work. And yet many hands might be the two hands that you have of your own that can get that started. And consequently, it reflects on the personality and attitude that you show throughout your life, in your family and to others with whom you are in contact. So we can thank our wonderful Germans from Russia heritage as a little bit of a link to who we are. In closing, can you draw out one character trait that you might think had an impact on you from that Germans from Russia culture?
Just what I just previously mentioned: work and tenacity, and keep your nose to the grindstone, as Mom used to say, and the value in it. Oh, also, cleanliness is next to godliness, folks.
Yes.
Or not, but that's something to remember.
Yes.
Both our parents were organized people. You could walk in a dad's shop and you can know everything is a place for everything and everything in its place. And that's kind of spilled over into my life too.
So, folks, what culture group has influenced your life in the 1950s and perhaps is still inside your entire being and influencing you? Dig into it and maybe reflect on that. Was it your mother, your father, your grandparent, your great-grandparent? It's all back there within that line.
Do you have anything that comes to your mind, Janine?
Probably tenacity. That, and then with Dad, he was a peddler and loved to serve people. And I am that way too with my business. I like to serve people, and the desserts that I make or the service that I offer brings joy to others. And perhaps that goes way back to Grandma, and we don't know what our great grandparents were like, and those who survived the ship travel and coming from one continent to another. Perhaps that's all part of it, is serving people and having a joyful heart to do it.
And so, folks, to get even more information about our heritage, check out that book that's up in the corner there, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. And look at the banner below. Go to www.whilethewindmillwatched.com for all sorts of information about the authors, about more about our book, our vendors, and where we might be signing books. So until next time, what should we do? Tell our friends, even our relatives, about the 1950s fun chat. Till next time. Bye-bye.